Just before we start, just a few ground rules. Please mute your microphones. If you have questions or comments, you can make them over there in the chat box. And I'm going to be monitoring it along with Michelle. And we'll be sure to get your comments heard and any questions you have answered throughout the talk. There's also going to be a Q&A at the end for additional questions and conversation. There should be emoji buttons that you can use along the way. So send some applause or love or whatever. And just feel free to join in that way. And then now I'd like to introduce Jane Vongvorachoti. Jane and I grew up together in Long Island and I've known each other from elementary school through high school. Jane's always been a talented athlete, but above all, she's a kind, humble, and inspirational person. She's played soccer for most of her life and eventually made the leap to long distance running. Jane holds 11 national records for Thailand, some of them including 2 hours, 40 minutes, and 40 seconds for the marathon, an hour, 15 minutes, and 13 seconds for the half marathon, 35 minutes and 4 seconds for a 10K road race. And for the 5K road race, she got 16 minutes, 36 seconds. And those are just to name a few of her accomplishments. Some more accomplishments she has is most notably competing in the marathon for the 2016 Summer Games in Rio de Janeiro, representing Thailand. She placed 20th in the London Marathon, 17th in the Chicago Marathon, and most impressive to me, she placed 5th in the Pittsburgh Marathon. In addition to being an elite athlete, Jane is an educator, personal trainer, and all-around awesome human being. And now, without further ado, let's welcome Jane. And if you want to unmute for here to send some applause or love, be my guest, and then we'll get started. Thanks, Jane.
Yay! Zoom
Thank you.
applause.
Well, it's been amazing. I mean, thank you for putting this together. I know I can't see everyone at the same time, but I'll scroll over as I do it. Somehow it doesn't work on my laptop. So yeah, but really excited to talk to everybody and just have an interaction. Amazing because you guys are in New York, because that's where I'm originally from. Definitely missed it and jealous of you guys probably because you guys have probably a lot of nature around. So yeah.
Yeah, we're not too far from the Adirondacks, and there's a lot of good trails for running, a lot of parks around here, so it's been great.
Did you want to start with any questions, or and then I can just go into it, or?
Right now the chat box is empty, so
Okay.
maybe if you like, you could start talking about growing up in Great Neck, New Hyde Park, which is on Long Island, just outside of Queens, and maybe how you got interested in sports, how you got started that way, and then if there's any questions, we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm one of two, so I have an older brother. I grew up in New Hyde Park, went to Lakeville School in Great Neck, and then went to Great Neck South Middle, and then Great Neck South High School as well. And how I got into sport was probably naturally following my brother. I think a lot of people like follow their siblings in what they do, whether it's arts and crafts, and I think my parents had a huge part in that because I think they had, they moved from Thailand and they met in New York, but they had the view of possibly keeping me as busy as I can so I don't get into trouble or go into gangs. I don't know if they thought there were gangs anywhere, but basically keeping me out of trouble. So, I mean, they put me in everything from ballet, gymnastics, piano, tap dance. Like every single day was trying something different. I think just because my brother was in soccer, I, would be on the sideline. And so I really enjoyed it and somehow really stuck with it. There was basketball at that time, ice skating. So yeah, so I did a lot of different sports kind of from a very young age, from following my brother to competing against him, and maybe not, I don't remember so much, you know, winning or losing, but just having fun with him. And you know, playing intramural soccer in New Eye Park, and making, you know, I was trying to make at 11, at the age of 11, you know, you think you're pretty good on your club team. So I went out for the Long Island select team, and I was cut because I didn't know any better. I didn't know what, you know, I remember the stuff that they did as testing, and I couldn't do a lot of them, but I was like, well, you know, my mom so it said, you know, like I was crying, I didn't make the team, and she's like, we'll put you in soccer camp, and with some of the trainers who actually were the coaches for that, and figure out what you need to do. So I think we navigated that way. We didn't really have the money to do one-on-one sessions, but like I was lucky enough to have coaches who I think all the coaches who have had influenced me to why I've become a coach the way I coach, is like they would spend like 30 minutes after a practice, you know, working one-on-one with me on something that I felt was a weakness, to get to the next level. And so, you know, I do the same thing with my athletes. Sometimes they have questions whether they want to talk, or, you know, they need some extra time on talking about something or working on something particularly. So I think that's where kind of my coaching, you know, and then paying it forward comes from, as well as, you know, figuring out how to get to the top didn't necessarily always mean using money. If, you know, I was with the right people, and I think I chose the coaches I have chosen along the way, and wherever I could, or I like the teachers who have had, because they were generous and they, you know, spent time with me. And so I think if you find someone that you want to work with that has a passion, and they're not about the money to begin with, and they're doing it for the right reasons, then, you know, I want to work with that person, besides their credentials. So I think that's how I got to where I am today, and how my philosophies of coaching as well, and, you know, why I give back to the community. The competitiveness just comes, I think, as you go along. And I think I just had, you know, competing with an older brother, and then wanting to be better than other people and different things, but not necessarily, I didn't, you know, run around. I was shy in a way that I didn't go around and like, if I won a race, I was just like, oh great, you know, I won. Now who else do I compete against? It wasn't like I was rubbing it in anyone else's face or anything. Like, I don't know if Andrew remembers, but in Lakeville we had the turkey trot, which was 1 mile.
Yep.
And they counted it by like laps, and you had like these sticks, I remember, and you had to drop them off. And I think I was the fastest girl, which is fine, but like I think I was 7th, and they had like a ribbon or something. So I think, you know, trying to then beat the other 7 boys that were ahead of me was my goal at that point.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, you know, it didn't matter if you were a girl or a boy. I kind of just wanted to be the best that I could be.
Well, I could tell you definitely beat me, and you probably lapped me even before I finished 1, because I remember having difficulty breathing doing that. How did you kind of transition then from high school to after high school with college and graduate school? So what
With
was
soccer
your,
or with soccer?
just what did you went to Columbia?
Yeah.
What did you study, and then how did you stay up with soccer and stay involved with athletics?
So in high school, so I love soccer, but you know, I guess if you want to use the term tomboy, I kind of like was one of those, but I wanted to do other things as well. So I did run, besides like the local, like the turkey trots that we had that our school had every year. I did that, and I played basketball as well. Again, I had somehow, I mean, it transitions. Like soccer is very similar to basketball, except on a shorter court. So I did that for a little bit, but again, like my scholarship came from soccer, and so then I continued that. But I figured what I noticed, so I didn't have the sprint speed, but I can read the game very well. So I started off as, you played every position as you're younger and you grow up. And then I was mainly a center mid because I can get everywhere on the fields and help out. Our team, unfortunately, wasn't the greatest at Great Neck South, but I would still, my coaches, they would say, oh, you can beat, like at the time, I don't know if you remember her, but Alyssa Femia had the record for the number of goals. I kind of was chasing that, but I also never wanted to be the person who was selfish. So I could take the ball and dribble it from the back, like a goal kick all the way up the field. And I would get the keeper to come out and pass it in front of the goal. And I remember, I won't name the person, but would miss an empty goal entirely when I could have just dribbled it into the net myself. But I just felt like that moment that you have your first goal, or like that it would be that person's first, joy to be able to do something like that. So, being able to create that for somebody, I think is very powerful. So I didn't break any record that way, but yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I was in soccer. Basically, I would use that as a place where I can excel and work on my weaknesses, I would say, of taking people one-on-one, or shots and stuff like that. So then when I went to college, I got a scholarship to Columbia. I played for them. I was mainly because I had the ability to read the field, but I wasn't tall enough. So I went outside mid and outside defender, and then also forward. So I rotated depending where I was. So that was kind of my experience in soccer. And I would say that I didn't end up staying at Columbia. And I mean, this can be a whole different conversation, and we can have a whole different discussion about mental health. But, going into my second year, I went through depression. I'd say pretty bad, where I actually ended up leaving Columbia. And then I think, as in anything, things happen for a reason. And so at that point in my life, like, my cousins in Thailand knew I played soccer and I was a really top athlete. And then there was an article that came out in the newspaper that they said, hey, we're looking for like an international soccer player who has dual citizenship to come over and help our team. And, I ended up actually in, what do you call it? Long Island Jewish Hospital. And I was able to, I literally was in the psych unit at one point, and they wanted, if you didn't want to be there, you had to tell them basically what your plan was, right? So I said, hey, I'm not going to do anything educational. I will follow with what my heart is, and that is playing soccer. And I had this opportunity to go to Thailand to represent the country. Mentally, I maybe wasn't the stablest person, but I was like, at least I know what to do. And I've done it before. And so I just took that opportunity and leap. And that's actually how I landed on the Thailand national team. They just wanted some references and videos. And so that's how I actually started playing for the Thailand national team, which I've played for, if I think about it, probably 7-8 years. So that was my kind of journey in the soccer world, with little bumps along the way. So it's not been perfect, which I'm sure some people think of when they maybe look at Olympians or they look at top athletes, that they don't go through these things. So, I mean, you guys can have any questions on that. I looked at the chat box when it popped up. I don't know if there was a question there.
Yeah, there was one from someone named Jean She grew up
Yeah.
in Brentwood, and she was wondering if you did a soccer tournament in Massapequa as a
Oh,
student.
100%. That was the Massapequa was actually like one of like the great, like they had really great soccer teams back then. Went to a bunch of their soccer tournaments. We won some, depending on what team I was on. Maybe we would lose, but we were constantly out there. So yeah.
Yeah. So then, how did you make the leap from being a national soccer player for Thailand to joining a marathon team and then running a marathon? Like, why running? Out of all the things you could do,
Uh,
how did you find yourself running in marathons?
okay, so back if you take it back a tiny bit, I told you that I had excelled in, like, when we did the mile test, and I'd win like a pumpkin pie basically every like Thanksgiving for this turkey trot. And then so I knew I was good, and then I was never able to do the cross country team, although I wanted to, because it was always the same season as soccer. But there were coaches around who knew that I can run, because obviously if I can run on a soccer field for 90 minutes, I can run. And then I did do my junior year in high school. I did compete, and actually I didn't train much. They said come to 7 practices or something like that, and then you're allowed to compete. So I just went to 7 practices and then competed, and actually junior year qualified for no, I almost qualified for a state meet indoor track in the 1000 meter. I missed it literally by a hair against this girl. I was so mad. So I came back next year and then actually did winter track, indoor track, and then outdoor track. That's where I ran with Chrissy. So we didn't do cross country, but I did indoor and outdoor track. And then I did make the state team, the state championship meet, and run the 1000, but on a relay because I wasn't fast enough for the 1000. So I did have a background in that. And that was, I kind of left it. But if you play college soccer, there's always a fitness test. And so we'd have, how many laps you can run, which is a Cooper test, how many laps you can do in 12 minutes. And then you would have even, sprints across the field. You'd have a lot of different things that included running. And I found that I excelled. I can read the game very well, like I said, and I can cover a lot of distance. So if I can be fitter than somebody else on the field, I'll have more playing time, because I didn't always start every game. Then I can break down to, like, I can take, if I can wear out the person I'm playing against or person who's marking me, then I will have that advantage on them. Or I can figure out which angle do I need to run on, and I can beat them to the ball if I wasn't faster than them, because I wasn't really fast in shorter sprints. So I had running in there. And when I first went to Thailand, one of the things I was like, oh my gosh, it's really hot here. I would literally go out at noon and I would just run around the soccer field. I mean, it was like 80, 90 degrees. And I was like, well, if I want to play well, again, I need to be in shape and I need to be able to actually handle this. Otherwise, before I even start, I'm just going to be wiped. So I use that. Then, for training, I decided, I was like, wanted to see if I could run to Roosevelt Field Mall if you're on Long Island. And so I had no cell phone there, and I brought a coin and I ran there, and then I called my dad to pick me up. I actually thought it was long. I didn't know how far it was. I tried to do it on a map, actually, with that. So I know how to read maps, old maps, and I would use an inch marker and then mark it out. And it was, it was 4 miles. But I quite didn't want to run back, and I was glad I took the coin, because it kind of ran through some sketchy neighborhoods on the way there, with like some cat calls, which I was like, made me run faster. No watch or anything. I don't have no idea what I ran. So yeah, I think I liked the challenge, and I did it for fun things. I did it to improve something else. And then there was, so I transferred. So when I went to Columbia, basically, because I had left voluntarily, like I told you, because of depression, you are not allowed to leave for half a year. You have to take the entire year off. That's just how it goes. And I was like, oh, like, one of the things I was worrying about was, all my friends are going to be graduating, X year, and I'm going to be graduating a whole year behind them. And, that was on top of everything else at that point. And so I think I learned a lot about how I can use running. And so even, when I was in, the psych ward, like, I was like, this is ridiculous. And maybe I'll tackle that one day. But you didn't have the space to work out. You couldn't, you had no shoelaces, if you went outside, it was like a small box area, and there were people smoking. So, there's different reasons I think I've gotten into running, and I found running has become freeing as well, and using it for mental health. So I think those are a couple of different things why I've gotten into running. And then in college, because I went from Columbia, like I said, I left that year, and I ended up not going back to Columbia, and I transitioned to St. John's University, where it was the coach who actually cut me at the age of 11. Funny enough, and I did end up playing for him before I got to college. We rejoined, and I joined him. It was 2 years before I went to college. I played for his team, and we went to national championships for soccer. But I was like, let me see. I really like him as a person. Maybe he'll take me on the team again. I like the environment he creates. So then I was at St. John's, and that means that because I was a year behind, I had 1 year extra of running left that I can do. So I tried to walk onto the team, and they said, sure. They allowed me to do that. And so I had 1 extra year. And so I ran what I had dreamed of doing, which was cross country, indoor and outdoor track, which happened to work out perfectly. So yeah, so I mean, that's how I really got back into running. I did, though, because I told you, I went into Thailand and do that running, and I knew that I was fast enough. And my roommate at Columbia, my first year, she was a track runner. So now she's like Division I Ivy League runner. And like I said, it has to do with coaches. And I asked her, I said, hey, I would love to like run with your team one day. And she said, well, if you want to run with us, the first practice you have to go to, you have to finish like the workout, the top 7. I was like, I guess I'm not running with you guys. So I never end up running with them. But somehow, I don't know, I found through all this confidence in myself to be able to ask the college coach. I had 1 more year left. I couldn't play soccer. So I asked the coach, and he said, sure, why not? And so that's how I really got into running.
So then how did you kind of find out that, hey, maybe I have I could compete on a national level? Like, how did you make that jump? Like, did
Yeah.
you realize like how fast you actually were?
Well, when I competed in college, that year that I had at St. John's, I did not finish well. I was like almost last all the time. It didn't matter to me, though, but it was a lot of fun, and I met amazing people there. So when I graduated, I went back into soccer again, because I used the last year of playing running, but I could still play, like, there's like clubs, you can still practice with the soccer team. So I did that, and there was the Long Island Rough Riders. I don't know if you guys know them. So I played amateur or semi-pro soccer at the same time. So I went back and tried to make, at that time, there was WUSA League, WUSA, if you know soccer, and then it shut down, and then it reopened. So then I was like, you know what, I've always wanted to try to make the US at least semi-pro team. They have like that now, or the professional team in the US. So I played soccer again until I hit 27, 28. And then I said, well, I need to start a career. I'm not like really making much money or doing anything. So, I mean, I'd coached along the way, summer camps. And then so my first job when I decided to do that out of, after college, right after college, I actually worked in, what do you call it? I worked at Target as a manager, got completely out of shape, and then decided that industry wasn't for me. Again, I felt I got back into playing soccer to get me back actually to being fit, and then I decided to be a personal trainer. And by becoming a personal trainer for about 5 or 6 months into it, it was my first race, Roadrunner race, was October 2010. I only ran, and that was a half marathon. I only ran it because my coworker, who was a master trainer at that time, said, hey, you know, you've been a soccer player, you've been training here, you're pretty in shape. Let me like write this little small program for you. And I finished 10th in New York Roadrunners. So if you know their races, they're quite tough. There's, you know, generally 8,000 people in them. And to finish about 10th is pretty good. So I found out, okay, maybe if I actually practiced, maybe I'll be good. And so naturally I looked up national records, and 2 weeks later, I was like, well, I don't like 10th, actually. I was like, I wonder if I can, I didn't understand distance. I didn't have a watch. I didn't run with a watch. And so I ran the next race 2 weeks later and got second in the Staten Island half. And then I looked up, you know, club teams or the better teams. What can you join? And then I fell across Central Park Track Club, and so working with the coach, trying to get to the level to make, you know, 2012 Olympics alongside with USA races. So racing all across the country, first to try to get better before I can get to a level where I can compete for a country.
What so then did you just kind of fall into like finding out that maybe you qualified, or like was that something you were like shooting for as a goal?
I was shooting for it, but I didn't know how far I was. Well, I kind of did, because I can't think of actually, I didn't even look up my time, but the first half I ran, I was like, oh, I basically have to double this and run a little faster, but I haven't practiced. So, uh, so I was like, okay, if I train and focus on one thing at a time, and I have a coach, and I always trusted my coach, I have 2 years I can possibly qualify.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, again, like I had this vision, and just as like when I was younger, which I didn't share, was like I had this vision of making a national team. I wanted to do it. I wanted to be the first like Asian soccer player for the U.S. national team to begin with. And I remember actually praying. I said, you know, all I want to do is like be a national team player. I was like, at this point, I was like, I don't care if I'm Asian or not Asian, but I wanted to be the first one. Lori Fair happened to be, and her twin happened to be. And I was like, I just want to make the national team. Maybe I wasn't clear enough, but apparently I landed on the Thailand national team instead of the U.S. national team. But that was fine. So yeah, so I, you know, planning, you know, I think helps. And so setting that mark and having that mark with my coach, and what races I need to do and what did I need to do to get there. So
we're getting some questions now about your training.
mm-hmm.
Kind of like specifically, what kind of training do you do, like miles per week, or do you train by MAF, by feel? And then another part is like fueling. What's your
Mm-hmm.
nutrition like? Is it plant-based, high protein?
So for training, so for training, are you talking about how well, not currently because I'm 37 weeks pregnant, but when I was in my peak, what time? Is there a specific, or you want more general?
Chris, you can unmute yourself and ask Jane.
Yeah, I think I was just wondering, like, when you were during your prime, like, were you putting in 110 miles a week? Were you just doing about like math with your heart rate training, or would you do a couple interval speed days a week to get it where you were with your marathon runs and so on?
Okay, so I mean, yeah, I would say my peak was definitely the Olympic year. I can definitely tell you there's definitely runners who've been able to do peak mileage while they work full time. I had chosen to, at 2015 earlier on, 2014 actually, when I knew I had the time to be able to qualify for the Olympics, I just had to do it within the qualifying period. I was starting to get exhausted and not being able to recover because I would have morning run, afternoon runs. I also had some strength training in there, plus full-time working as, at that time I was a phys ed teacher, plus I coached after schools in the New York Roadrunner program. And on weekends, like I was doing a little personal training at that time. And I was like, as much as I put my money into like a master's degree and all this stuff, I said, if I want to be an Olympic athlete and professional, I need to treat myself that way. So then I took basically a year and a half off that 2015 year and part of 2016 going to Olympics off. And from the time I was able to qualify, and also like 2012 when I missed the qualifying mark, it's only just because I didn't have enough experience and that kind of stuff and training. I don't know, the way that I think, I was like, okay, what do the professionals do? And they are running 100 to 120 miles a week. And so I backtracked and I said, I don't know if I can handle 120, but I think maybe there's a logic to running 100 miles per week. So I backtracked. So 2016, I want to be at 100. 2015 was 90, then so forth. And where I was my first marathon, I only ran 40. And maybe some of you have run with 40. Don't be surprised. There's different ways you can approach it. But it's just something I planned in my thing. And when I talked to my coaches, and I've switched coaches along the way, but yeah, so you need to plan as far as like, I planned way in ahead of like where you need to be. And I would say as a coach, from a coaching perspective, depending on where you are, I really loved when I was then working part-time. It's full-time, but two different types of jobs. I think if you can run, and if you're an elite runner, you can still and want to hit really good times, like 70 miles to 75 is actually really good. If you're new, it's something different. There's different approaches, but I coach different people who are low mileage and high mileage. But I really felt I can bounce back better with about 70, 75 miles from one marathon to the next, because I actually had to do that because I missed the qualifying mark at Berlin during the qualifying year, which was 2015. I threw up with 7K to go, and I missed it by a couple minutes, like 3 minutes if I remember right. And so I had to run within Berlin. So Berlin was September, October. I had to run Houston, and I ended up qualifying in Houston. So I had to do a pretty quick turnover, but I had the mileage there. So it depends. And within your training week, so if you're talking about general, it was the cycle that worked best for me, not with the current coach that I've had in the last 2 years or so, was generally, that I suggest is something like Monday is speed day, Tuesday is either a strength day or a recovery day, depending. And then Wednesday was off or a longer run, depending where, again, you're on your cycle. Thursday was your harder effort. So if you just do just the running, it would be hard day Monday, hard day Thursday, long run Saturday. So you have your rest in between. So if that's all you do, with you're fine. If you're a new or beginner, Monday, Thursday, Saturday, you have some break up. And then depending, so I do strength on Tuesday. There's a reason I do it on Tuesday, but my workout is earlier, so later on Monday, I can also, depending on what the focus was, I can also do a strength training that day as well. So if I did a track session Monday morning, I can do a strength training Monday afternoon, and then Tuesday may be something easy, or it can be a recovery day or something like that. So there's different approaches depending on what I was training for and where in my training cycle I am. And that's why it's important to have training cycles within if you're doing marathon, a marathon cycle. That can be a whole conversation, as well as how you structure that. Yeah, so I also write running programs in general, like for people across the world. So generally, people in New York, Thailand, and London, basically where I am. So I can always go into that as well. And then there's a nutrition question.
Do you use plant-based or more protein? I think it was, and that came from Chris as well.
While I'm training, you mean, or just in general?
Yeah, like what approach would you use for nutrition? Is it plant-based,
So
high protein, things like that?
So I've never been a person who was completely, I'd say, strict with nutrition. And I would say I kind of, if you're talking in general, and just to be honest, like from when I was actually, I mean, my parents, I mean, gave me McDonald's on weekends when I was growing up. And that was our treat. But and I was playing soccer, I'd have a bagel at halftime, or if like during tournaments. But then as I, approached college, I was really strict. My mom was a nurse, and she realized, I mean, she came from Thailand. She realized like how important nutrition was. I didn't really have that many cookies and ice cream and that kind of stuff. And then I went to college, and I saw, this player who started all the time that I looked up to had cookies every time I thought like I saw her. So I had this mixed view of like, what does it take to perform and to be on, the highest playing level. And I found, I think, if you listen to your body, it will tell you what you need. And obviously now through coaching and all the experience, there is techniques to do for like fueling and what I tell my athletes. So I definitely say you don't have to cut, like if you're worried about like weight gain, it depends on what your goal is. So if you got into running because you want to lose weight, that's your goal first is weight loss. It's not necessarily getting to the marathon. You want weight loss. You're doing the marathon in order to lose weight, for example. So in that case, I would then maybe say, okay, yeah, we can work on nutrition. And these are things, just because you're training for a marathon and you did a long run, and approximately every mile you run, you burn 100 calories. So depends on what your goal is. So I'd say that's number one. If your goal is performance and you've done everything, then I would look into calorie intake and how much you're expending, because I think a lot of people like, oh, I'm going to train for a marathon and a half and I'm going to lose weight just because I'm running a lot more and I wasn't running before. But then some people find that they're eating more and they don't realize it. So tracking sometimes helps. Some people love to track, and some people are not trackers. I hate tracking, but there is a point where, I'm working with, professionals who are monitoring me, and they want to understand, what is going to fuel me and be the best for me. So I had to do it for 3 days, and I realized by looking at what I ate at certain times, I was like, oh yeah, I'm actually not eating anything nutrient dense. So my view is, yes, you have some running goals, but you need to have a view of, you're going to do this for the rest of your life. Like, why should I just eat crap or not eat crap just for a period of my life and suffer because, you know, but I say there's a balance, you know. If I want a piece of chocolate, for me, I found out I better have that little piece of chocolate, or else I'll eat everything ahead of that and then still have the piece of chocolate. So, but I've become really, like, right now in my life, health is really important, obviously, because I'm pregnant as well. Like, that's going to go to my baby. But in general, I think you should eat whole foods, not processed foods. I do believe that, and this is scientific, is as you get older, your body doesn't break down proteins as well, meaning plant in meat. So you shouldn't. It takes about 2 or 3 days to break down meat, especially if it's like a burger, for example, or a steak. So it takes you that long amount of time to break that up, and that's in your system. So I try not to eat too much meat. One of the things that I had actually promised myself when I got a little bit injured before 2019 was my last marathon, and I had such a great training cycle, but then I had this tendon issue about 3 weeks before that race, and I had to take off basically. And I basically, there is it's not a Buddha, I would say. It's similar to Buddha that you look up to. It's a female in Thailand, and my dad believed about this, like, since you know, when we were young, because it worked for him. And basically, if you pray and you sacrifice something, and the Buddha is female and she eats vegetarian, and so he said, you know, he had prayed for me when I was younger. It's like, you know, she shouldn't, they said if you had allergies, which I did, he would eat vegetarian 1 day a week. So I said, before the race, I said, if you can get me through this race without like pain in my tendon, I will dedicate 1 day a week to eating plant-based, basically. And so I do that every Monday, and then it's not strict in the fact that, like, if I'm on a vacation or whatever, and, you know, 4 days a week I couldn't do it because of where I am, I can make it up a little bit later. And then I have found I feel better. So more of the days of the week, or at least 2 of the meals, tend to be plant-based. And then I do have meat and stuff like that, because if you are especially female, really important for you to have iron, and especially for me now as well. So I think it depends. If it's race nutrition, again, it'd have to be individual. Like, do you have diabetes? Do you process meat very well? I also go off of Eat Right for your blood type. So you can look that up as well. Like, I'm group O, so there's certain foods that may not digest very well. I wasn't sure if that was true, but I tried it and it seemed to be the case. So I tried some of those things. There's so many different ways and things we can even go off of when you talk nutrition, and how you should fuel. You definitely need to have carbohydrates and protein before you race day, like 500 calories or so 3 hours before a race. And then there's other ways to fuel during a race as well. There's also fasted run, which is a technique as well. So I've used different ways. I've tried intermittent fasting just because I wanted to see how it is if I was ever asked about it. So yeah, so there's not a right or wrong answer. So if you're a vegetarian and you want to run fast, there is a way to do it, but you need to probably supplement in other ways.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, do you want to share maybe like any little story about race day at in Rio, or any like short story about your experience there overall? Maybe not race day, but maybe like what was it like living in Olympic City? Um,
Yeah, I mean,
something that most people might not know. It was also like,
yeah, I mean, I think it was one of the best times in my life. I feel like everything since I started running in 2010 was competing and, you know, trying to make the team in 2012. I felt every single marathon I had run was trying to be a flat course or a paced. I had to run a certain pace. And I was like, hey, I'm ranked like 100 something or so in this the going into Olympics. So I was like, look, unless something really, really bad happens, I am not going to win the medal. And I was like, let me train to finish as high as possible. So that was kind of my approach to it. And I said, actually, most of these athletes, some of them probably are like me. They don't have the huge sponsor and stuff like that. And they're probably training in either cooler weather than this, but I had the advantage of training in Thailand, which was awful. But it prepared me to compete in the humidity and the hot weather that I was going to compete in. And then also then I transferred and trained in New York. So I was actually really positive, and I took all this advice about how to train properly for that race, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, I had a lot of times where a lot of races I told my parents not to come because they're not circular courses, so they may or may not see me, and they would stand there for hours. So I always felt bad. So Olympic races and World Championship races are repeating. So in the Olympics is you come out and then you run a loop, and that you pass 1.3 times on that side, but because it's like an out and back, they can still see you on the other side. So I was really happy to have my family there. So I heard them 6 times basically cheering for me. And I had my previous coach who had left, she happened to be there, and she had another athlete. And it was really nice. Like, you know, we didn't have any bad feelings for each other, and she cheered me on. I had the coach who actually challenged me to run the charity race my first half happened to be there as well, because he had a Taekwondo athlete qualify, and I had him help me a little bit with some strength stuff. So that was really nice. And then he was my fiance then, but he's my husband now. He was there as well, so that was really nice. Yeah, so I think I had a really good race tactic. My coach wasn't there at the time. That coach I had only stayed with for probably about 4 or 5 months stint. It's nothing, you know, against him or anything. It was just I had switched over when I was in Thailand, and I came in, and it was the best fit at the time. And I would say, yeah, I had a lot of fun. I mean, Olympic Village, because if you don't remember, that was a year they said they may cancel because or something because of Zika virus.
Yep.
And so my parents were worried and all that kind of stuff. So, but they said so they would go around and spray the village like really, really early, probably like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was really hot, obviously. So when I'd go on my run would be at like 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. So you can kind of smell it a little bit, but you know, whatever. You weren't doing anything serious. So that was my experience running. And then sometimes then I would run at the time that they wanted us to run or race time. So that was that. In the village, I mean, you could touch the wall. I mean, my room was so tiny. It was like a makeshift. That place is not used for anything anymore. It's really sad. They should have just turned it into a school or low cost living for somebody, but they wanted to make it into luxury apartments, which is another huge topic, but we won't go there. But yeah, like you had a really small room, like it was really simple. You had food, like what you'd imagine like the cafeteria you grow up in, like in a school, but just on a massive level. And then you had like all the different foods. So, cause you have people from all different countries. So it'd be Asian foods. They would have, you know, your pastas, of course. And then they even have breakfast foods that are always there, because some people may only just want oatmeal or bread or or cereal and hot water. Then they have a salad section and all that kind of stuff. So they had that dining hall, and then they would have also an outside spot where you can go as well if the weather's nice and you wanted to go. They had acai bowls that they had prepared and some extra like stuff if you want to line up there. You can go anywhere, and they would be like Powerade. You can take as much as you want. I took a bunch of like Powerade like packets, and I just took them just because I had the logo. They had a game room, which was really nice. And then they had a section which is really surprising, but McDonald's is one of the sponsors. So they had McDonald's, and I could not tell you. I mean, every athlete is different. Every training sport is different. You had a limit of like 6 items you can order, and the line was like out the door. I was like, these are Olympic athletes. I'm like, how are you eating this?
Well, you trained with McDonald's too, so back in the day with your parents.
Oh my God. Like, I was like, I don't know how you guys are eating this. And, we had an Olympic committee from Thailand, and they also have like a Olympic house for your country that's outside the village. So you could order actually food from your country that your country provided. So that was nice as well. I didn't really do it because I just ate whatever they had. They had that. They had Dunkin' Donuts. They had, parades and stuff like going in. I would say that, I was focused. I was having fun, but I wouldn't really, I had 2 people who made the Olympic stuff with me, but I didn't do too much stuff with them because I want to rest and, have a really good race. But I would say, like, I think if I was on a soccer team, maybe the experience would be a little bit different. As far as like, I don't know, having more fun interacting with more people there that I knew. I did have people that I knew going in for representing other countries, so I was able to do some runs with them because they felt the same way. They were marathoners from their country, or we shared the same sponsor, and we finally met each other. So that was really nice.
Jane, we got
yeah.
a couple more questions. Yeah. And we're starting to run out of time too. One of them is about recovery. Yep. And that's from Michael. What do you usually do for recovery? Is it just like rolling, stretching? Do you do like strengthening after for recovery? What's that look like? What's a recovery look like for you?
So recovery in different places. So what I recommend is, if you just finished a run or something like that, static stretching is pretty good. If you're just finished a run after a speed, like a really fast workout, probably not so much, because you could, like if you just hammered and your hamstrings had worked and your calves are sore, I wouldn't say to necessarily do that. But then you can definitely ice bath. If you hate ice baths, take those flexible ice packs and ice and wrap it around, put your legs up. But I then would also then say, after you take it off or your ice bath, don't go right away into a warm shower or hot shower, unless you're doing the technique of cold, hot, which you're in like a hot tub and then you're going into a cold dip, hot tub and cold dip. That's a different type of recovery. But I think for the normal, if you're training, icing, before workouts, I'd say mobility stuff. I can go through a whole mobility thing it depends on the person, but there's stuff that you should do, especially if you sit all day and you're going to go for a run. Mobility, I would say you can foam roll. For me, I tend to get tight in my calves or my foot, or my quads in certain spots. So knowing your body and then foam rolling and using that as well is really good recovery. Using nutrition as recovery. Eat within 30 minutes, even if it's not your dinner. Like carb, protein a little bit, get it in, and you're going to recover much faster. Your performance comes from your recovery. You're stressing your body during your workout, how you recover and how well you recover is how you get better. So that's hydration, that's food, that's resting. So those are types of things that you need to look at. What right now I'd say sleep is huge, especially with different the environment right now and what we're doing. Some people are overworking, staying up late at night following different series, TV series. I put my phone literally in the other room an hour and a half before bedtime, or when I want to go to bed, then do other things. Don't watch the TV. You have plenty of other times during the day that you can do it. Schedule it in somewhere. So yeah, I say schedule those things as well, to keep some normal life, yeah, in there as well.
Awesome. How can the club continue to connect with you?
So yeah, you can email me. I answer everything, so even on Instagram and stuff. So you can email me. Maybe you can. Let me see if I can type it in. I'll type it in the chat. My email.
I could do that for you.
Oh yeah. Well, there you go.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then that's my Instagram. You can definitely follow me. You can message again on Jane Runs for Life. That's my Instagram. Or you can email me. I answer all your emails. Just maybe in the title, say you came from your club and stuff like that. I'd love to do another Zoom talking on something specific. If you guys are looking for, hey, we want to talk about recovery. Hey, we really want to focus on nutrition or sleeping and recovery and regeneration. I can do a seminar just for you guys on certain topics. And hey, we want to do a workout together. Like, what's the best way to do that for running? I don't necessarily like going and doing HIIT programs. I want to do something that's specific to what I want to do. A whole mobility session. What is mobility? Is it the same thing as flexibility? So yeah, so I would love to do something with you guys on that. How to train as you're getting older, like, or if you're injured, what can you do? What can you do now? So there's so many different topics. I love doing, this stuff anyway. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Jane.
Yeah.
I think that's all about the time that we have right now.
Yeah.
So
What time is it there now?
it's right now it's 1 o'clock.
Okay. Awesome.
It's like 6 by you, right?
Just about to turn 6.
Yeah.
But yeah, so really, I mean, I am totally open with any kind of questions you have. Like if it's a personal thing that you want to talk about. Like I said, I've gone through different things in my life, like that I think a lot of people probably can relate to. And how do I get out of those things? Like whether it's one of the things I think is huge right now is probably mental health. So if you have things that you feel like you're down and stuff like that, please, like, especially that, like, reach out to anybody and reach out to me if you feel like I can help in any way. And yeah, so I'm an open door.
Thank you so much, Jane. We really appreciate you sharing your story to the Utica Roadrunners, and we'll be staying connected with you. We're getting some messages, a bunch of thank yous now coming through in the chat. I don't know if you could see that. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your story and your personal experiences with us. And we'll be in touch, you and I too.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, it means a lot to be able to share it with, especially you guys are, I would say you guys probably are New Yorkers. So, it makes me feel a little bit like home, and that I can help somebody, or just share my experience across the world, because I think we need some people to relate to as well. So yeah, so anything that I can help. And also, if you haven't started running or whatever, just let me know. And you need help like starting running, or you have a significant other who you want to try to get active, a mother, like I've trained my mom too. She does not run, but that's another story.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We're getting comments. Good luck with your baby. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I have, if you follow on Instagram, and I'll try to do on Facebook. Facebook has a limited amount of followings, but I post a lot more on like Instagram and how I'm doing, and so you can always ask questions and stuff like
Okay,
that.
great. Michelle, if you want to stop recording for now?
You got it. Is there
Okay,
something
great.
you want to say that you don't want on record?
No, I think we're done. But
Awesome. Jane, thank you so much. That was fantastic. That was great.
Welcome.